My husband thinks he lost everything today. He's pacing outside, destroying himself over a company he believes is gone. But he doesn't know the half of it. He doesn't know that 5 years ago, when he was broke and broken, it wasn't some mysterious investor who saved him. It was me, his kindergarten teacher wife. I am the ghost who built his empire from the shadows. And now, because of one phone call, he's about to find out the truth. The problem is, the truth won't set us free. It's going to destroy us both. Julia, that's my name, Julia Ann Whitmore. At least, that's the name I was given when I was born, 34 years ago, in a small, sun-baked town in Arizona. It's the name on my driver's license, on my credit cards, on the deed to this beautiful, sprawling house in the Hamptons where I now sit. But to the world, to the business world, I'm known by another name. Or I was. I was known by no name at all. I was the ghost. My husband, Ethan, is pacing the length of our oceanfront deck. The Atlantic is a churning, slate-gray mess today, mirroring the turmoil I feel inside. He's on the phone, his voice a low, frustrated rumble that drifts through the open French doors. He's talking to his lawyer, his banker, probably his mother. He's lost everything. Or he thinks he has. He thinks his brilliant, groundbreaking tech startup, the one he poured his soul into for 5 years, the one we all believed in, is about to be swallowed by a corporate giant for a pittance. He thinks he's failed. He doesn't know I'm listening. He doesn't know a lot of things. He doesn't know that 5 years ago, when he was just a dreamer with a laptop and a wildly ambitious business plan he'd scribbled on a napkin at a dive bar in Brooklyn, it wasn't a random, eccentric billionaire who believed in his vision. It wasn't some faceless venture capital firm that saw potential in his algorithm. It was me, his wife, the girl he'd met just a year earlier, who he thought was just a pretty kindergarten teacher with a gentle laugh and a knack for making a mean lasagna. I was his secret investor. The one who provided the initial 7-figure seed money that turned his dream from a napkin sketch into a real company. And I never, not once in 5 years of marriage, told him. You might be wondering why. Why would a wife hide such a thing? Why let the man you love believe he built his empire from nothing, that he was a self-made titan of industry? The answer is simple, and it's the most heartbreaking thing I've ever had to admit. I was afraid. Not of him, but of us. I was afraid that if he knew the money came from me, he would stop seeing me as his partner in life and start seeing me as his patron. I was afraid it would poison the pure, simple love we had. The love that began, as all the best stories do, by accident. I was 28 years old, living in a tiny apartment in Manhattan, a world away from my dusty Arizona childhood. To everyone I knew, I was Julia, the kindergarten teacher. I worked at a small, progressive private school on the Upper West Side. My life was a comforting rhythm of finger painting, story time, and parent-teacher conferences. I had a small circle of friends, a fondness for old black and white movies, and a deep, quiet loneliness I couldn't quite shake. But there was another part of me. A part I kept locked away, a secret identity I never spoke of. You see, the money wasn't new. It wasn't a lottery win or a surprise inheritance from a forgotten aunt. It was blood money. Or, at least, that's how I always thought of it. My maiden name was Julia Ann Sterling. My father was Harold Sterling. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a titan. He built Sterling Capital from the ground up, a colossal private equity firm that gobbled up companies, restructured them, and sold them for a fortune. He was brilliant, ruthless, and completely consumed by his work. He made a fortune, a vast, obscene fortune, and in the process, he made himself a stranger to his only child. I grew up in a world of nannies and boarding schools. My memories of my father aren't of bedtime stories or baseball games, but of fleeting glimpses at charity galas, of the faint scent of his expensive cologne on a coat he'd left behind, of hushed phone calls with his assistants that were always more important than I was. My mother, a fragile, beautiful woman who loved him desperately, faded away in that gilded cage. She died of a broken heart, or perhaps just neglect, when I was 16. After that, my father and I became polite strangers living in the same enormous, empty house. We talked about my grades, my college applications, my future. We never talked about us. When I graduated from college, he handed me a trust fund, a staggering sum of money. It was his way of saying, "I love you," his way of absolving his guilt. I took it, not out of greed, but out of a desperate need for some connection to him. But I couldn't touch it. It felt dirty. It felt like the price he paid for not being a father. So I moved to New York, I became a teacher, and I lived on my modest salary. The millions sat in a bank, accruing interest, a ghost in my own life. Then I met Ethan. It was a Thursday night. A friend had dragged me to a loud, crowded bar in Williamsburg. I was nursing a drink, feeling overwhelmed by the noise when I saw him. He wasn't trying to be the center of attention. He was in a corner booth, alone, hunched over his laptop, scribbling furiously on a napkin. He'd look at the screen, then at the napkin, then back at the screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was so completely absorbed in his own world, it was captivating. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the 2 drinks I'd had. Maybe it was the loneliness. I walked over and sat down across from him. He jumped, startled, as if I'd appeared out of thin air. "Sorry," he stammered, running a hand through his messy brown hair. "I didn't see you there. I was just in the zone." "I could see that," I said, smiling. "What's so important?" He hesitated for a second, then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It was a smile that lit up his whole face, a smile that made his blue eyes crinkle at the corners. "My whole future," he said, tapping the napkin. "At least I hope so." He pushed the napkin towards me. It was covered in a web of interconnected circles and lines, a chaotic diagram that, at first glance, looked like a child's doodle. He launched into an explanation, his voice filled with a passion I'd rarely seen. He talked about algorithms and data streams, about connecting people in a way that hadn't been done before, about creating a platform that would revolutionize how small businesses interacted with their customers. To be honest, I didn't understand half of what he said. The technical jargon flew over my head, but I understood the fire in his eyes. I understood the dream. It was the same kind of intense, all-consuming fire I'd seen in my father's eyes, but it was different. My father's fire was about power and conquest. Ethan's fire was about creation, about building something that could actually help people. I stayed for another hour. We talked about his idea, about my job teaching kids their ABCs, about our lives. He was from Ohio, a farm boy who taught himself to code. He was earnest, optimistic, and completely unpretentious. He was everything my father's world was not. We started dating. Our relationship was simple and sweet. We'd go for walks in Central Park, see independent movies, cook dinner together in my tiny apartment. He was the first person I'd ever felt truly comfortable with. I could be quiet with him, and it wasn't awkward. I could tell him about the kids in my class, and he'd listen like it was the most fascinating story in the world. About 6 months in, he told me he was going for it. He was quitting his safe, well-paying job as a developer to pursue his startup full-time. He was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. He spent months refining his business plan, building a prototype, and trying to get meetings with investors. I'd come home from school and find him slumped over his laptop, defeated after another rejection. "They don't get it," he'd whisper, his head in his hands. "They just see a kid with a half-baked idea. They don't see the potential." I'd hold him, stroke his hair, and tell him he was brilliant, that they were all fools. And I meant every word. I saw in him what no venture capitalist on Sand Hill Road could see. I saw the passion, the intelligence, the sheer stubborn will to succeed. Then came the night he hit rock bottom. He came to my apartment, his face ashen. He'd had his final meeting. A firm that had shown initial interest had passed. He was out of savings, out of options. He sat on my second-hand sofa, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "It's over, Jules," he said, his voice thick with tears. "I have to let it go. I have to get a real job." I sat beside him, my own heart breaking for him. And in that moment, a strange, quiet calm settled over me. The decision was made before I even knew I was making it. I saw the 2 paths of my life converging. The money my father had given me, the money I'd seen as a curse, could be the key to unlocking the future of the man I loved. It could transform from a symbol of my father's neglect into a symbol of my love for Ethan. I took a deep breath. "Don't give up yet," I said softly. "What if you had one more investor?" He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "There is no one else, Julia. I've talked to everyone." What if you hadn't?" I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew I couldn't tell him it was me. He'd never accept it. He was too proud. He'd see it as charity, as pity. It would change everything. So, in that moment, a lie was born. An elaborate, complicated, necessary lie. I know someone, I said, an old family friend. He's eccentric. He's an angel investor. He likes to stay anonymous. He hates the whole scene. He just likes finding good ideas and backing them quietly. Let me send him your plan. Ethan looked at me, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. You do that? For me? Of course, I whispered, kissing his forehead. That's what you do for the people you love. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of clandestine activity. I set up a new email account under a pseudonym, using a VPN. I drafted a letter to Ethan, posing as the investor. I called myself Mr. A. It felt ridiculous, but it had to be done. I praised his vision, his tenacity, and said I was prepared to offer him $2 million in seed funding in exchange for a 40% stake in his company. I can't describe the look on Ethan's face when he got that email. It was pure, unadulterated joy. He burst into my apartment, picked me up, and spun me around. He said yes. Jules, he said yes, your friend, the anonymous investor, I'm going to be a CEO. I laughed and cried with him, my heart bursting with love and already a tiny, sharp pang of guilt. The lie had taken its first breath, and it was alive. The lawyers handled everything. I had a high-powered attorney in the city, a man who had managed my father's affairs and now managed mine, albeit reluctantly. I swore him to secrecy, explained the situation as best I could. He thought I was insane, but he did as I asked. Mr. A's identity was protected by a standard blind trust. The money was transferred. Ethan Whitmore was in business, and I watched with wonder and pride as my husband built his empire. Nexus, his company, was a sensation. His algorithm was genius. It connected local service providers, plumbers, electricians, tutors, dog walkers, with customers in a hyper-efficient, trust-based system. It took off like a rocket. Within 2 years, it was valued at over $50 million. Within 4, it was a unicorn, a billion-dollar company. We got married in a small ceremony in Central Park, just a few months after he got the first investment. He was on top of the world. We bought this beautiful house. We traveled. We were the picture of a perfect, successful young couple. And through it all, Mr. A remained a silent, benevolent ghost. I'd receive quarterly reports from his lawyers. I saw the company's value skyrocket. My initial $2 million was now worth over $400 million, but it was all on paper. It was all still Ethan's. It was all still our future. Ethan often spoke of Mr. A. He was a mythical figure to him. My mentor, he'd call him, my guardian angel. I wonder what he looks like. I wonder why he never wants to meet. I owe him everything. Each time he said it, a little piece of me died inside. I wanted to scream, it's me. I'm right here. You don't owe a stranger in the shadows, you owe me, your wife. But I couldn't. The longer it went on, the harder it became. The lie had grown, its roots wrapping around the foundation of our marriage. To tell him now, after all these years, would be to admit that our entire life together was built on a foundation of sand. It would be to admit that I hadn't trusted him with the truth from the very beginning, so I stayed silent. I played the role of the supportive wife. I went to his company galas in my beautiful gowns, smiling and nodding at his colleagues, the tech bros and their polished wives. They'd gush about his brilliance, his drive, his rags-to-riches story. They never looked at me. I was just the pretty wife, the kindergarten teacher who'd gotten lucky. And now, 5 years later, the truth was about to come out, whether I wanted it to or not. Because for the first time, Mr. A had to act. He had to make a decision. A behemoth tech corporation, Omnicorp, had made a hostile takeover bid for Nexus. They were offering a price that was good, but far below what the company was truly worth. They were banking on the board being intimidated, on the shareholders wanting a quick, safe payout. And the board, a group of suits Ethan had brought on as the company grew, was wavering. They were pressuring Ethan to accept. They saw the bird in the hand. Ethan, however, was fighting tooth and nail. He believed in his company. He wanted to stay independent. He wanted to build a legacy, not just sell out for a quick profit. But he had a problem. Mr. A was the largest single shareholder, with his 40% stake. Mr. A's vote was the swing vote. If Mr. A voted in favor of the Omnicorp deal, Ethan would lose. His board would side with the largest shareholder, and the company he built would be gone, swallowed by a soulless conglomerate. Ethan came home that night, more stressed than I'd ever seen him. He didn't pace the deck then. He just sat in his study, staring at the phone. "I have to call him," he said, his voice hollow. "I have to talk to Mr. A. I have to convince him not to sell. He's the key to all of this. If he sells, it's over." My blood ran cold. "Call him? You can't call him," I said, my voice a little too high. "You know he doesn't take calls. Everything goes through the lawyers." "This is different, Jules," he said, running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since the bar in Williamsburg. "This is personal. I need to make him understand. I need to remind him of the vision he invested in. I've left a dozen messages with his attorneys, begging for a meeting, for a phone call, for anything. They just send back the same robotic response. Mr. A is aware of the situation and is considering his options." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "You know him, Jules. You set this all up. Please, can't you call in a favor? Can't you just give him a call? Tell him who I am, what this would mean to me, to us." I felt the world tilt on its axis. The moment I had dreaded for 5 years was here, and it was so much worse than I could have ever imagined. He wasn't asking to meet a stranger. He was asking me, his wife, to call myself. "I can't," I whispered. "I can't do that, Ethan. You know the rules. He's a very private person." He slammed his hand on the desk, making me jump. "Private?" he shouted, his frustration boiling over. "He's been private for 5 years. I've never met him, never spoken to him. I've sent him personal letters, invitations to our wedding, pictures of our life, and I've got nothing but silence. He's not a person, Julia, he's a ghost. And this ghost is about to destroy everything I've worked for." He was crying now, tears of rage and despair streaming down his face. I've never seen him like that. It broke me. I stood up, my legs trembling. I walked over to him, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I placed my hands on his shoulders. "Ethan," I said, my voice a shaky whisper. "Stop." He looked up at me, his face a mask of confusion. "What? You need to stop," I repeated. "Because Mr. A, he's not going to sell. I promise you, he's going to vote with you." He stared at me, his brow furrowed. "How do you know that? Did you talk to him? Did his lawyers call you?" "No, Ethan, no one called me. I know because I'm Mr. A." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I've ever heard. It was a vacuum, a void that sucked all the air out of the room. He just stared at me, his blue eyes wide and uncomprehending. He shook his head slowly, a small, disbelieving movement. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm Mr. A," I said again, the words tumbling out in a rush. "There is no anonymous investor. There never was, it was me. The money, the $2 million, it came from me, from a trust fund my father left me. I saw you that night, on your sofa, broken, and I couldn't let your dream die. I couldn't, so I pretended to be an investor. I set up the blind trust. I funded your company, Ethan, from the very beginning." He stood up slowly, pushing his chair back. He looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. There was no anger in his eyes yet, just a profound, gut-wrenching shock. You funded my company?" he repeated, his voice flat. "All those years, the emails, the legal documents, the silent partner I worshipped, that was you?" "Yes," I whispered, tears now streaming down my own face. "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. I was so afraid. I was afraid of what it would do to us. I was afraid you'd think I was trying to control you, or that you'd feel like you owed me something. I just wanted you to have your dream. I wanted you to succeed because of who you are, not because your wife gave you the money. I loved you. I love you." He took a step back, away from me. The shock in his eyes was slowly being replaced by something else, something cold and hard. "You loved me?" he echoed, his voice dripping with a bitter irony I'd never heard from him before. "You loved me so much you lied to me every single day for 5 years. You let me pour my heart out to you about my mysterious benefactor. You let me sit here and cry about losing it all to a faceless corporation, knowing full well that you were the one holding the knife." "No," I protested, reaching for him. "It's not like that. I was trying to protect us. My vote will save the company. I was never going to sell." He flinched away from my touch as if I'd burned him. "Protect us?" he snarled, his voice rising. "You didn't protect us, Julia. You built a prison for us. A prison made of lies. Our entire marriage, was it real? Or was it just a way for you to keep an eye on your investment?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "How could you even ask me that?" I gasped. "You know how I feel about you. "You know I love you, do I?" he shot back. "How can I know anything anymore? I don't even know who you are. You're not just Julia, the kindergarten teacher. You're Julia, the secret millionaire. You're Julia, the puppet master. You've been pulling the strings of my life from the very beginning." "That's not true," I screamed, the tears choking me. "I never interfered. I never told you what to do. I just gave you the chance. The rest was all you, your genius, your hard work, your late nights. That was all you, Ethan. The money was just the key. You built the house." He laughed, a horrible, broken sound. "A key. You think this is about a key? You took away my choice, Julia. You took away my right to fail or succeed on my own merit. For 5 years, I've walked into boardrooms with my head held high, thinking I was a self-made man. I was a fraud. A puppet whose strings were being pulled by his sweet, quiet wife who was pretending to bake cookies while secretly owning half his company. My legs gave out. I sank onto the leather sofa, the same sofa I'd held him on 5 years ago when he'd cried over his failed dreams. Now, I was the one sobbing, and he was the one standing over me, a stranger wearing my husband's face. "I never meant to hurt you," I pleaded, my voice muffled by my hands. "I only ever wanted to help you." "Help me?" he said, his voice now quiet and terrifyingly calm. "You wanted to help me, or did you want to own me?" My father was a farmer. He taught me that when someone gives you something for nothing, they own a piece of you. I thought you were different. I thought our love was different, but you were just like all the rest. You just used a different kind of currency. He walked to the French doors and stared out at the churning ocean, his back to me. The silence stretched between us, vast and cold as the sea. "So," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "what happens now? Does Mr. A vote to save the company, and then what? Do we go back to pretending? Do I spend the rest of my life knowing that my wife is my silent partner, that my success is a gift you allowed me to have?" "It doesn't have to be like that," I said, getting to my feet, my whole body shaking. "We can work through this. We can get counseling. I'll transfer the shares to you. I'll give them all to you. I don't want them. I never wanted them. I just wanted you." He turned around then, and the look in his eyes shattered what was left of my heart. It wasn't just anger. It was disappointment. It was a deep, profound disappointment in me, in us, in everything he thought we were. "You think I want the shares?" he asked, his voice thick with contempt. "You think this is about money? This is about trust, Julia. The one thing a marriage is supposed to be built on, and you destroyed it. You took the most fundamental part of our life together, and you made it a lie." I opened my mouth to speak, to find the words that would make him understand, but nothing came out. What could I possibly say? He was right. In my fear of losing him, in my desperate attempt to protect our love, I had done the one thing guaranteed to destroy it. I hadn't trusted him with the truth, and in doing so, I had proven that I didn't think he was strong enough to handle it. The phone on his desk rang, shrill and jarring in the suffocating silence. He stared at it for a long moment, then walked over and picked it up. "Yes," he said, his voice flat. He listened for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then a single, stark line appeared between his brows. He looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of the old Ethan, the confused, hurt man I loved. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that cold, hard stranger. "Understood," he said into the phone. "Thank you for letting me know." He hung up and stood perfectly still, just looking at me. The silence was a living thing, coiling around us. "That was my lawyer," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Mr. A's vote has been officially cast with the board. He voted in favor of the Omnicorp acquisition." The world stopped. I stared at him, my mind refusing to process his words. "What?" I breathed. "No, that's impossible. I didn't, but the truth hit me with the force of a tidal wave. In my panic, in my desperate confession to Ethan, I had forgotten. I had forgotten about the one thing I had set in motion years ago. When I had set up the investment through the blind trust, I had given my attorney, Mr. Sterling's old attorney, full discretion to act on my behalf in matters of routine business. I had been so focused on keeping my identity a secret, I had given him the power. And when the Omnicorp offer came in, when the pressure mounted, he had done what any good, conservative, risk-averse lawyer would do. He had looked at the numbers, seen a guaranteed, massive return on investment, and voted to sell. He had followed his fiduciary duty, completely unaware of the personal apocalypse he was unleashing. "No," I whispered, the word a puff of air. "I can stop it. I can call him. I can revoke it. "It's too late, Julia," Ethan said, and his voice was so calm it was terrifying. "The vote is cast. The board will accept. The company is sold. Everything I built, everything you helped me build. It's gone." He walked towards the door of the study. He paused with his hand on the handle, his back to me. "You wanted to protect us," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "You wanted to give me my dream. Well, you succeeded, Julia. You gave me a dream. And then, with one final, perfectly executed lie of omission, you took it all away." He opened the door. "Ethan, please," I sobbed, stumbling towards him. "Don't leave. Please, we can figure this out." He didn't turn around. He just stood there for a moment, his shoulders rigid. "I don't know who you are," he said quietly. "And I don't know if I can ever look at you again without seeing Mr. A." The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. I heard his footsteps on the marble floor of the hallway, then the front door opened and closed. A moment later, I heard the sound of his car starting, the gravel crunching under the tires as he drove away. I was alone, in our beautiful house, with our shattered life. The hours that followed were a blur of numbness and pain. I don't know how long I sat on that leather sofa, staring at the door, waiting for him to come back. The ocean continued to churn outside, gray and relentless, indifferent to my suffering. The house, once so warm and full of our shared life, now felt like a mausoleum. Every photograph on the wall, every book on the shelf, every cushion on the couch was a reminder of what I had destroyed. Eventually, the gray light outside the windows faded to black. I hadn't moved. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't even cried anymore. I was empty, hollowed out. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Then again, and again, I ignored it. It was probably Ethan's mother, or his sister, or one of our friends, wondering where he was, why he wasn't answering his phone. The news of the sale would be public by now. The tech blogs would be exploding. Ethan Whitmore, the boy wonder, had sold his billion-dollar baby to the evil empire. They wouldn't know the real story. They would never know about me. Around midnight, I finally dragged myself upstairs to our bedroom. I lay down on his side of the bed, burying my face in his pillow, breathing in the fading scent of him. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows and my phone was ringing again. This time I answered. It was my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, the man who had cast the fatal vote. "Julia," he said, his voice brisk and professional, "I've been trying to reach you. I assume you've heard the news." "Yes," I whispered. "I heard." "Excellent news," he continued, oblivious. "The Omnicorp deal is a tremendous outcome. Your return on investment is approximately 200 times your initial capital. You're a very wealthy woman, Julia. Your father would be proud." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that my father's pride meant nothing to me, that he had just destroyed my marriage, my life, everything I cared about. But I couldn't. It wasn't his fault. He had done exactly what I had asked him to do. He had acted in what he believed were my best financial interests. The fault was mine, all mine. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice flat. "I'll be in touch." I hung up and stared at the ceiling. $400 million. That was my reward for destroying my husband's dream. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. Days turned into weeks. Ethan didn't come back. He didn't call. He didn't text. I saw his face on magazine covers in online articles. The headlines were always the same. Whiz Kid sells out. Ethan Whitmore cashes in. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know he had no choice. They painted him as a traitor to his own vision, a sellout who had chosen money over legacy. I knew the truth was killing him. I tried to reach out. I sent him texts, pouring my heart out, apologizing over and over again. I called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I even drove to the city, to the Nexus headquarters, but the security guard told me Mr. Whitmore was no longer working there. He had cleared out his office the day after the sale. I was cut off from his life completely. His friends, our friends, stopped returning my calls. I was a pariah, though they didn't even know why. They just knew that Ethan had disappeared and that I was somehow responsible. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant companion. One night, about a month after he left, I was sitting in the study, the scene of the crime, staring at the dark ocean. A glass of wine sat untouched beside me. I was replaying that night in my head for the 1,000th time, wondering if there was anything I could have done differently, any words I could have chosen that would have made him stay. Then I heard it. A key turning in the front door lock. My heart stopped. I held my breath, listening. Footsteps in the hallway, slow, heavy footsteps. Then the study door opened. Ethan stood there. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow and rimmed with red. He hadn't shaved in days. He was wearing an old sweatshirt I'd never seen before, and his jeans were dirty. This was not the polished, successful CEO who had left this house a month ago. This was a broken man. I stood up slowly, afraid that if I moved too quickly, he would vanish like a mirage. "Ethan," I breathed. He didn't say anything. He just walked into the room and sat down on the leather sofa, the same sofa where I had held him 5 years ago, the same sofa where I had crumbled under his accusations. He put his head in his hands. "I had to come back," he said, his voice rough and tired. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." My heart lurched. "Of course," I said softly. "Of course, you can come home. This is your home. It will always be your home." He looked up at me, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable to witness. "I've been staying in a motel," he said. "A cheap one, out on the highway. I couldn't face anyone. I couldn't face what I'd become. What you've become." I asked, moving closer but not touching him. "You're still Ethan. You're still the man I love." He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that reminded me of the night he'd lost everything. "The man you love?" he repeated. "That man doesn't exist anymore. That man was a fraud, a puppet, a dreamer whose dream was bought and paid for by his wife." "That's not true," I said, my voice firm despite the tears threatening to fall. "The dream was always yours. The idea, the algorithm, the late nights, the sweat and tears, that was all you. I just provided the canvas." He stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, a single tear slid down his cheek. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "In that motel room, staring at the walls, hating you, hating myself, hating the world." I nodded, not daring to speak. "And I realized something," he continued, "something I didn't want to admit. I was angry because my pride was hurt. I was angry because the story I told myself about my life, the self-made man, the farm boy who made good, turned out to be a lie. But was it really a lie?" He looked at me, and for the first time since that terrible night, I saw a flicker of something soft in his eyes. "I thought about that night," he said. "The night I hit rock bottom. I was sitting in your apartment on your crappy second-hand sofa, crying like a baby. I had nothing. No money, no prospects, no future. And you held me. You told me I was brilliant. You believed in me when no one else did." "I remember," I whispered. "And then," he said, "you gave me a chance. You didn't give me a handout. You didn't try to run my company. You didn't tell me what to do. You just opened a door, and I walked through it. I built Nexus. I made the decisions. I hired the people. I worked the 80-hour weeks. The success was mine, Julia. The failures were mine too, but thank God there weren't many. The point is, the money was just the starting line. I ran the race." I was crying now, silent tears streaming down my face. "So why did you lie?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I was a coward," I admitted. "Because I was afraid. My whole life, money had been a weapon. My father used it to keep me at a distance, to buy his way out of being a parent. I was terrified that if you knew the money came from me, you would see me the same way. You would think I was trying to control you, to own you. I didn't want to be your investor, Ethan. I wanted to be your wife. I wanted to be loved for me, not for my money." He was quiet for a long time, processing my words. "You're not your father," he finally said. "You're nothing like him. I see that now. Your father used money to build walls. You used it to build a bridge to my future." I moved closer and knelt in front of him, taking his hands in mine. They were cold. "Can you ever forgive me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at our joined hands, then up at my face. The anger was gone from his eyes. In its place was something deeper, more complicated. Sadness. Loss. But also, I dared to hope, a tiny spark of the love we had shared. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't know if I can just forget. The lies, they cut deep, Julia. Every time I think about all those conversations, all those times I talked about Mr. A, and you just sat there, listening, it hurts." "I know," I sobbed, "I know. And I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. I'll sell the shares, I'll give the money away, I'll stop," he said, squeezing my hands. "Stop, I don't want you to sell anything. I don't want you to give anything away. That money, it's part of our story now. A twisted, complicated, painful part, but it's ours. He took a deep, shuddering breath. I'm not saying I forgive you, he said. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time, but I'm here. I came back. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, I whispered, leaning forward and resting my forehead against his. It counts for everything. We sat like that for a long time in the quiet study, the ocean murmuring outside. Two broken people holding on to each other in the wreckage of their life. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't even close. It was a beginning. A fragile, tentative, terrifying beginning. The road ahead would be long and hard. There would be more tears, more fights, more painful conversations. The ghost of Mr. A would always be with us, a shadow in the corner of every room. But for the first time in a month, Ethan was home, and that was enough for now. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. Ethan stayed, but he was a stranger in his own house. We slept in the same bed, but there was a chasm between us wide as the ocean outside our window. He would wake up screaming some nights, nightmares about the company, about the sale, about the betrayal. I would reach for him, and he would flinch away. The intimacy we had shared, the easy touch, the spontaneous kisses, the whispered I love yous, all of it was gone, replaced by a cautious, painful politeness. We started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Chen in the city. Every Tuesday afternoon, we would drive into Manhattan together, sit on her comfortable couch, and try to untangle the mess we had made. The sessions were brutal. Dr. Chen forced us to be honest, to say the things we had been too afraid to say. Ethan poured out his feelings of emasculation, of betrayal, of having his identity stolen. I confessed my fears, my insecurities, my desperate, misguided love. Slowly, painfully, we began to understand each other. Ethan started to see that my lie, while devastating, came from a place of love, not control. And I began to understand that my fear of his pride had been a self-fulfilling prophecy. By not trusting him with the truth, I had proven that I didn't trust him at all. One evening, about 6 months after he came home, we were sitting on the deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a calm evening, the ocean gentle and quiet. Ethan reached over and took my hand. It was the first time he had touched me voluntarily since that terrible night. I've been thinking, he said, his voice soft, about the future. My heart skipped a beat. What about it? I don't want to be Ethan Whitmore, the guy who sold his company, he said. I don't want to be known for that. I want to build something again, something new, something that's mine. And he paused, looking at me. I want you to be part of it. I stared at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean, he said, turning to face me, I want to start a new company, a clean slate. And this time there will be no secrets. This time you're not just my wife, you're my partner. In every sense of the word. I want you to be my co-founder. I want your name on the paperwork. I want your ideas, your input, your support. Not in the shadows, Julia, in the light, tears welled in my eyes. Are you sure? I whispered. He squeezed my hand. I've never been more sure of anything. I spent the last 6 months mourning the loss of my old identity, but I realize now that identity was built on a lie anyway. The self-made man was a myth. The truth is, I never would have made it without you. And that's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. We did this together. We just didn't know it. I threw my arms around him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he held me back. We clung to each other as the sun dipped below the horizon, two people who had been through the fire and somehow, miraculously, come out the other side. The new company was called Second Act. It was a venture capital firm with a twist. We invested in startups founded by people who had failed before, who had been knocked down by life and were trying to get back up. We understood them. We had been them. Ethan brought his business genius, his ability to spot a winning idea from a mile away. And I brought something else, empathy. I understood the fear, the insecurity, the desperate hope of the underdog. I had lived it. We worked together, side by side, in a small office in Brooklyn, not far from the bar where we had first met. There were no secrets this time. Our finances were completely transparent. We made decisions together, argued together, celebrated together. The ghost of Mr. A was finally laid to rest. It wasn't easy. There were days when the old pain would resurface, when Ethan would get a distant look in his eyes and I would know he was thinking about Nexus. There were days when I would wake up in a cold sweat, terrified that I had ruined everything again. But we talked about it. We didn't let the silence grow between us. We had learned that lesson the hard way. Our first investment was in a young woman named Maria, who had created an app to help single mothers find flexible, well-paying work from home. She had been turned down by dozens of investors who told her the market was too small, the idea too niche. We saw her passion, her drive, her brilliant mind. We funded her. 2 years later, her company was valued at over $100 million. At the celebration party, Maria raised a glass and thanked us, calling us her guardian angels. Ethan looked at me and smiled, a real smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. This time, we were angels together. 5 years after that terrible night, we sat on our deck again, watching another sunset. The ocean was calm, painted in gold. Our son, Harold, named after my father in a gesture of reconciliation I never thought I'd make, played at our feet with a toy truck. Our daughter, Lily, was inside, doing her homework. Ethan put his arm around me and pulled me close. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked quietly. "About Mr. A?" I leaned my head against his shoulder. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but it feels like a lifetime ago. Like a story about someone else." "It was a lifetime ago," he said. "It was the prologue. This is the real story." I looked out at the ocean, at the beautiful house, at my beautiful family. The money from the Omnicorp sale had funded all of this. It had also funded Second Act, which had now helped over 50 struggling entrepreneurs find their footing. The money my father had given me, the money I had once seen as a curse, had been transformed. It had built bridges, not walls. It had given people second chances. My father never got to see any of this. He died a few years after Ethan and I got back together, a lonely, wealthy man in a sterile hospital room. I visited him in his final days. We talked, really talked, for the first time in my life. I told him about Ethan, about the lie, about the truth, about Second Act. He listened, his eyes cloudy with age and regret. "I was proud of you," he whispered, his voice weak. "I just never knew how to show it." I held his hand. "I know, Dad," I said. "I know." He squeezed my fingers, a faint pressure. "You're a better investor than I ever was," he said, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "You invest in people." He died that night holding my hand. And in his death, I finally found peace with his life. He was what he was. A flawed, complicated man who had loved me in the only way he knew how. And the fortune he left me, the fortune that had caused so much pain, had ultimately become the foundation of something beautiful. Ethan's voice pulled me back to the present. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I smiled, watching little Harold chase a seagull across the sand. "I was thinking about ghosts," I said, "and how sometimes you have to let them go." He kissed the top of my head. "I love you, Julia Ann Whitmore. Not Mr. A, just you." I turned and looked into his blue eyes, the same eyes that had captivated me in a crowded bar so many years ago. They were older now, wiser, with a few more lines around them. But the love was still there, stronger than ever, forged in the fire of our shared pain. "I love you too, Ethan Whitmore," I said, "just you." And as the sun sank into the ocean, painting the world in shades of gold and purple, I knew that the story of Mr. A was finally, truly over. The ghost was gone, and in its place stood something real, something precious, something that no amount of money could ever buy. A love that had survived the worst kind of betrayal, a family built on the ruins of a lie, a second act more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. My name is Julia Ann Whitmore. I am a wife, a mother, an investor, a daughter, a survivor. And this is my story.